everybody, I'm Kendall.
And I'm Jono.
And we're Bike Gearheads.
And today, we're going to talk about the new Yeti SB165.
Yeah, this is a super exciting new bike from Yeti. All builds are coming in mixed wheel configurations now. This is the first time we've seen that from Yeti.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
All new tech. It's still 165 millimeters of rear travel, but it's now 170 millimeters up front. And we're seeing SRAM UDH compatibility. That means you can also run their new transmission group sets, which is great. Some of the other updates are similar to the updates we saw like on the SB140 and the 160. So we now have a threaded bottom bracket.
Love to see that.
Yeah, we have some added down tube protection here. Revised cable ports are super good to see. What else has Yeti done?
So it's got their new compact link, which is easier to service, easier to find bearings for, and also easier to remove the shock, which is nice to see.
Nice, yeah. I think it just has a better trail feel as well.
That as well. It's probably the biggest benefit, really.
Uh-huh. The bike's offered in 4 sizes, so that's small, medium, large, extra large. The large and extra large sizes, they say fit 200 millimeter plus dropper pellet stroke. So for the tall guys, that's good news. An interesting note on the new 165 is we haven't heard anything from Yeti that this bike is dual crown compatible. Remember the old SB165 was, and so that makes us wonder if maybe there's a downhill bike in the works. We've been seeing Richie Rude on one. What do you think?
I don't know. For Rampage, we saw Reed Boggs on the 165 with a dual crown, right?
Yeah, so he was still riding, the original SB165, but yeah, we've seen a couple guys on that new downhill bike. I wonder if it's gonna go commercial.
Yeah, I bet they'll push people to the downhill bike. That's my prediction.
If they decide to release it.
Yeah. All right, so you're riding the large, right?
That's right.
Okay, and what are the geo numbers on that? I guess we should break it down by sizing too, because some numbers do change quite a bit with the sizing.
On the large, the reach is 480 millimeters, so a little bit short for someone my size. The chainstay length is only 437 millimeters, which also a little bit on the short side, but does add some really like playful characteristics to the bike, which we'll talk about later. The wheelbase I think was pretty middle of the road. I want to say like in that 1260 range. Head tube angle, we have 63.5 on this bike, so I love seeing this in new Enduro bikes. I think slackered really does give you more stability at high speeds. The effective seat tube angle is 76.9, so that is nice and steep. I mean, you can tell just by looking at the bike that it's a steep seat tube angle. Definitely helps with the climbing position, and we'll get into climbing characteristics later on. And yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty balanced. I mean, I will definitely say that I would prefer to ride an XL for this bike, but you know the way it goes. Marketing bikes are typically size larges, and so rode it. Still think I got some really good like first impressions and like ride characteristics from the bike. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown for Geo.
So how many build options are there for this bike?
This bike has 4 build options. So we have 2 with the C-level carbon frame, and so that's the C2 and the C3GX transmission. The C2 runs a mechanical group set. We have the T2 build, which also uses a mechanical drivetrain. And then we have the T3XO transmission build, which is the one behind us. This is the one that I spent some time on. This is the most expensive build that the bike's offered in. So we have XO transmission group set, Fox factory suspension, Code RSC brakes. Just a handful of really nice components on this one.
Nice. And I noticed there are no Shimano builds, at least right now.
Out of luck if you're looking for the Shimano. But the wheels that we're seeing on these builds are DT Swiss across the board, I believe. I'm a big fan of those wheels. I think they're just super reliable and damp feeling. So
for sure.
Good to see.
And carbon option as well as alloy?
The stock wheels on all the builds are aluminum. For the 2 T-Series builds, you have the option to bump up to a more expensive carbon wheel set from DT Swiss.
Okay.
So kind of an interesting move. Feel like I would expect to see carbon wheels on the nicest build option from Yeti, but they provide the upgrade option if that's what you're really looking for. I will say that these aluminum wheels ran great and didn't feel heavy. I think Yeti does a great job of making the bike feel energetic, and we can talk about that later on.
Yeah, and DT makes great carbon and alloy wheels, so I'd run either as well. Super
durable.
So it's time to hear how it rides. So first, how does it climb up to get you to the fun downhill?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the 165 is an impressive climber across the board. Coming from a 29er, when I first jumped on the bike, it just took me a second to settle into the climbing position. With the smaller rear wheel, you're just sitting a little bit differently on the bike. After I got my dropper height sorted out, my saddle position, I definitely really started to settle into the climbing and really enjoyed climbing on this bike, actually. It really reminds me of just climbing on a mid-travel bike. It was super impressive, especially with the coil shock, which has a 500-pound spring on it, which for me is a little bit soft. It still felt super supportive on the climbs, and I never felt the need to lock the shock. I tried it on a road, but just found it more or less unnecessary.
That's great.
for like the non-technical climbing, right? Like on fire roads, on like easier climbing trails that don't have big rock steps, it's super efficient. And then that all just kind of carries into technical climbing as well. I found that the rear wheel produced like great traction on like steep climbs. I didn't have any rear wheel slip, even with like relatively high tire pressures, so that's impressive. I'm really curious to see what it weighs in at, but I could have swore it was like sub 35 pounds, which for an enduro bike with a coil shock is crazy. Don't think I've really ridden an enduro bike with a coil shock that climbs this well, maybe ever.
Okay, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
So then, once you're at the top, it's time to descend.
Finally.
How does it perform? And what were the trails like that you were on?
Fruita has some pretty chunky stuff. I would say there's nothing overly steep, but we did hit some good old huck to flats. There was plenty of that, and that was kind of the first thing I got to test the bike's chops on, if you would, and it was really impressive. I think the smaller size just made it so that I had to be like a little bit more accurate with placing the bike, placing the wheels, and all those things. The rear of the bike is super supportive. Like I didn't have any like harsh impacts to my ankles or anything like that. I'm sure I bottomed out the shock, still, and
Did you feel it ever like bottom out, or is
no? It doesn't. It doesn't have that like harsh clang, which some coil shock bikes do have. I didn't really feel that with this one. Felt really supportive. With tracking, it was also really solid. It was bone dry, not a lot of traction in the dirt in Fruita, and I think the bike tracked really well. It was super rocky, lots of like unsupported berm sections, and like even some off cambers like on steep hillsides. And yeah, I never felt like the bike was gonna like run away from me.
So with the mullet setup, did you feel like the rear end is more playful? Did you pick up on that versus a 29er?
It's great. I mean, it makes the bike really fun to corner. That was definitely something that I realized right away. It's just so much easier to place it. And then you get into the cornering knobs a little bit more quickly. Just makes it more reactive in general. And then on those drops, like the kinds of drops that we were riding were like fairly technical, like usually like taking off from a rock, often onto more rocks. And so it was really important to like be able to get the pop that you're expecting, kind of maneuver the bike in the air to make sure that your wheels land where they're supposed to, and you don't like land on a sharp spot and get a flat. So I think it really, it helps to just have the whole backside of the bike feel a little bit lighter with that smaller wheel having less mass and also just being smaller in size. And so it makes it a lot easier to place that wheel. I think Yeti also did a really good job with the rear linkage. Like I've heard other brands, mixed wheel bikes, like people complain that like the rear wheel hangs up or this or that. And I just really did not notice that with this bike at all. Like it plows right through what you want to push it through. It's just a great bike to just like drop your heels and like push the wheel into stuff. You don't have to hesitate.
And it was designed to be a mullet, where some brands still are, they have one bike that's 29er, and it's like, you can flip some links and it's now mullet compatible, but this one is designed specifically for the smaller wheel device.
Exactly. It's a dedicated mixed wheel bike, and Yeti's saying that it's not compatible with the 29-inch wheel at all. So if you're going for the full 29er, just look at the SB160 instead.
All right, so who's the bike for?
This is an interesting one. I think this, first and foremost, is an enduro race bike, right? Like that's what it's engineered for, and it's a great pick for that. Like the way it's built, it's pretty much ready to go for enduro racing right out of the box. But the thing that gets me excited about this bike is just how strong of like a one bike quiver it really truly would be. With the climbing performance, even with the coil shock, like you could build this thing up to be like really strong on the descents, and then its climbing performance is like just amazing.
So what if I only do lifts?
If you only do lifts, I think you could run this bike. I think you might be happier with something even a little bit more long travel, like a downhill bike. But I think for the rider who maybe lives somewhere with access to like steep, gnarly trails, but like is wanting to mostly pedal to those trails, this is a really interesting bike that I think you should probably look into.
All right, you talked about how light it is, how nimble it feels. I think we got to weigh it and see if the numbers back you up.
Yeah, historically, I'm actually not very good at guessing weights, but I still am going to throw out a guess. I really think that this could be as low as 34.5 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the spec, I'm gonna say 32.5.
That's crazy. Let's weigh it.
Yeah. Dang it. 36 pounds, 2 ounces.
Yeah, we probably should have cleared that up front. I was kind of thinking pedal-less weight, but yes, with the big flat pedals, 36 pounds, 2 ounces. Still
not bad.
Pretty lightweight bike.
Yeah.
Coil shock, aluminum wheels.
EXO Plus. So that's a wrap on the SB165.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions about this bike or any of the other ones that we sell, be sure to reach out to a Gearhead.
And if you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you out in the trails.
Yep.